Hello guys, and welcome back to another video. So I wanted to film a video today that I've never filmed before on this channel, but I've kind of dabbled in this kind of content before. I mean, things to do with my work, with my career history, how I sort of ended up where I am, and how I got into this field, what am I doing in Milan. And now that I'm leaving Milan, I thought it could be really interesting also to recount some of the experiences that I've had here in work, in how I found my jobs, in speaking Italian in my jobs, you know, everything to do with sort of work life, and I guess sort of my journey in Milan from where I started to how I got my first internship and everything like that. I actually have a video already on my channel. I'll link it here. It's called From McDonald's to Vogue or something similar. And it's all about how to break into the fashion industry with no experience at all. And that very much speaks to my journey from where I started. So just to give you guys a bit of context, I grew up from the age of 14. I had always had a casual job, and I remember it was just before my big trip to America, because I grew up dancing, and we had this trip to America planned, and we were doing all of these fundraising activities and everything like that, which was sort of to pay for our visas and our dance classes that we were going to do there. But I remember at that age, I really wanted to have my own spending money, and my parents sort of said to me, look, we'll give you this much, but if you really want to save up to go on this trip, we really want you to get a part-time job. And so that's exactly what I did. And so it's so funny when I look back at that video, because it really did start like that, like such humble beginnings. And I know like a lot of people that grow up and you get your first part-time job, and in my case it was at McDonald's. I was working in the drive-thru, I was taking people's orders, I was cleaning up people's vomit from the dining room. I remember an instance clearly, cleaning up someone's vomit from the bathroom. And that was my first job. I was there for about 2 years. I remember finishing school and getting off the bus, walking to my job to do my 4 to 11 shift at McDonald's on a Wednesday. And I would do the same thing on Friday as well. So I would work Wednesday nights and Friday nights, and oftentimes all day on Sunday. And that would be my little routine. That was, for 2 years of my life, I would get up, I would go to McDonald's, and I saved up for my first car, and that was my first, I guess, kind of achievement. And I spoke to this a little bit in that video that I posted a few years ago now. I think it was back in 2021. And I was talking all about this boy that I met while I was working at that job, and we would often work in the drive-thru together, and he was also very much into fashion. And I remember clearly every weekend of my childhood, even before high school, before my teen years, my sister and I were just obsessed with the Mary-Kate and Ashley films. And now they've gone on to be really successful fashion designers with the Row and everything, and I love that brand. It's so well created and beautiful. But anyway, we'll get to that part of the video later. But I remember growing up, and every single weekend I would watch the movie The Devil Wears Prada. I was just absolutely infatuated and fascinated by this kind of life and this life in magazines. And I know that growing up in that time, especially in the early 2010s and even before that, like the early 2000s to mid 2010s, which was, you know, the time where I grew up, it was very much the dream to work in a fashion magazine. And I always had that as my kind of pinnacle of career goals. I wanted to work for a fashion magazine, and I wanted to do fashion journalism or photojournalism or work in something to do with writing and fashion. I always knew that those were really big passions of mine, and I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I kind of was living in a way that I was already there. And it was kind of strange And it's kind of strange even looking back, because I was a little girl. I grew up in the Blue Mountains, which is like west of Sydney, very west of Sydney. And I was from a little, you know, suburban kind of town. No one was really into fashion or anything like that. And I just felt like this little girl with a big dream, and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know where to start. I didn't have any contacts. I didn't have connections in the fashion industry. And I was just, you know, a little bit disheartened. But at the same time, I feel like in a way I lived in this fantasy world, and it's such a weird thing looking back, because the things that came after that were absolutely fascinating to me. So while I was in this job at McDonald's, and I met this guy, and he had sort of really similar interests to me when it came to fashion and everything, and we would oftentimes just have conversations about what we wanted to do with our careers and where we sort of wanted to go with it. And we would often talk about both wanting to work for fashion magazines and our fascination with the fashion world, and making jokes about Meryl Streep and how much of an icon she was in the fashion world. And I remember when I left that job, 2 years later, I had got this job in a restaurant bar, and I was driving back home one day, and it was this really snowy day, and I sort of stopped off to fill up my car with petrol, and I received this message on my phone. And the message is from this guy, and he wrote to me. This was 2 years later, so we'd kind of both, you know, moved on, had other part-time jobs, and I was studying at this point, going to uni a couple of days a week. And he messaged me, and he just says, hi Kaya, I wanted to message you because I'm in this experience right now, and I'm interning for this magazine called GQ, and GQ at the time was in the same building as Vogue, and so they kind of worked in the same office. They had the GQ magazine workers and also the Vogue workers in the same office. So he messaged me, he said they're looking for new interns at Vogue. They've kind of just let go of a bunch of their interns, and they're looking for new ones to start sort of immediately. And I was, I think, 17 or 18 at this point. I think I just turned 18, just started uni, and I was looking for my first internship, because I had in my head that, I mean, in the fashion industry, and this definitely rings to be true even today, this is kind of how people grow in the fashion industry or get their first positions, internships, is that you oftentimes start from nothing. You work for free. And in this case, this guy had told me about how Vogue was looking for interns, and that I should send my CV and apply, I guess, to this internship. And so I drove home so excited that day. I don't know, but I felt like I was already there. I felt like I was already living the reality of, you know, walking through the doors of Vogue Australia and working there. And I got home, opened up my laptop, and I took out the CV I'd used to apply at McDonald's. And it was so funny because I hadn't even, you know, updated my CV. I don't even remember if I had to have a CV to apply at McDonald's. I don't even remember, but anyway, I didn't have a CV basically. So I kind of tried to craft this CV in a way with no experience at all. I had McDonald's on my resume, and I emailed the fashion assistant at the time, and I was just like, hi, I'm Kaya. I said a little bit about myself. I said a little bit about what I was studying and the couple of restaurants that I had on my CV. And I just said, I'm really interested in fashion and looking for my first internship. Please find my CV attached for your reference. I'd love to come in for a trial day. She replied in like 15 minutes and said, absolutely, come in for a trial day. We're starting new interns this Thursday if you want to join. And I honestly felt like it was a dream come true. And I think in that moment, it was probably, I would say, my first proper experience with manifesting something. And I don't even know if I was intentionally doing it, but that's definitely kind of what led me to that internship. And so I was in Vogue. I had gone in for my first trial day, and all of the interns kind of gathered. I remember being there half an hour early. I was sitting there with my coffee, waiting for the fashion assistant to come down and collect me with the little badge. I entered with my little badge that I had to give back at the end of the day. I would go up to the receptionists and ask for it in the morning, sign in, and the fashion assistant would come down and collect us. So there would usually be like 2 or 3 of us on each day, but I remember this first day, there were about 4 or 5 of us in the office, and there was this drama over an earring, and this earring had been lost because at Vogue, obviously they get sent a lot of samples from brands for magazine shoots, so for the monthly issue, and they often get sent a lot of jewelry, a lot of clothing, and everything that they're going to be featuring in the magazine. And I remember this one day they got lent this pair of earrings. It must have been, I don't remember what brand they were, but it was something really, really high priced. And I just remember the fashion assistant was freaking out because one of the earrings had gone missing, and so we had to dedicate this entire day to trying to find this earring, which in the end no one was able to find. But I just remember that being the drama of the day and my first experience sort of looking through the lens of someone in Vogue. And I remember just looking all around, and I saw all the editors and this young girl who, she was sort of sat next to us, and she was into like all of the editorial stuff. So she was writing, I think, for Vogue Living and Vogue Beauty, and I was often just looking over at her while we were uploading all of the photos, because basically our job sort of day in and day out in the fashion office, so we were in the fashion closet and we had to check in all of the arrivals, keep track of them, go over the invoices, file all the invoices, take photos of everything. And then so at the end of the day, we'd have to print off all the photos of all the arrivals that we'd got, attach them all to the invoices. And then when it came to returning the pieces back to the brands, we would have to go through in the fashion cupboard and cross off everything as we found it, put it all together in a bag and send it back off to the brand. And that was like the main, I guess, tasks that we did day in and day out. So we got to touch like all of the beautiful pieces, and we would often help to pack the bags of people going overseas. So the staff that were going overseas for a New York Fashion Week trip or Paris Fashion Week trip. And it was just, it was surreal really looking back and being that young, and I felt like all of my dreams were coming true in a way. And I remember there was this one opportunity that came up, and they had asked all of the interns who would be available to do a shooting in Palm Beach, which is about a 2-hour drive from Sydney. It's on the northern beaches of Sydney, and there was this shooting there for one of the monthly issues. And I put my hand up straight away. I was like, yes, absolutely. I will be there, even though it was a two and a half hour drive from where I lived at the time in the Blue Mountains. And it was a call time, I think, of 6 a.m. And so I got in my car. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning this day. Got in my car, drove to the location set, and arrived there. I think I was still even a bit early. I arrived to this location set. It was on Palm Beach. It was absolutely beautiful. I think it must have been, it was up a little bit. No, maybe it wasn't Palm Beach, but it was like Bayview or something, like Pittwater, close to that kind of area anyway. Yeah, maybe it was Bayview. And from this house, it was in this house up the hill a little bit on the northern beaches, and just had this beautiful view of the bay, of Lovett Bay, I think. And I just remember, I mean, we were just steaming clothes, we were getting everything ready for the models, we were looking around, there was catering, there were all of the workers, and we would sort of have to go back and forth in the car because they were at one location doing the pool shooting, and then the other house location where they were doing all of the kind of resort and beach kind of beachwear and that kind of thing. So yeah, that stood out to me, and that was the first paid day. I remember they paid me $150 for the day, and it was just a dream come true really. I remember having my coffee and just looking out at the view and just being like, wow, like I'm here, and I feel like this is the start of something really big. And so fast forward a little bit, I mean, I was at university at the time and I was studying communications and international studies, so it was nothing to do with fashion. Even though I knew I wanted to get into the fashion industry, I kind of had it in my head that I knew being in the fashion industry, I didn't want to necessarily be a fashion designer or, you know, something very specific. I didn't want to limit myself to something really specific in the fashion industry if I didn't quite know what I wanted to do yet. But I knew obviously the main fashion capitals that were Milan, Paris, New York, and London, and I wanted to be based in one of those countries. So I remember when I was doing my in-country study preparation, so because I did a double degree, I did communications and international studies, and for the international studies part of that degree I had to choose a major. So the major was a country, and I chose Italy sort of tactically for that reason, because then in the 4th year of university you got placed in a university in Italy. So that is what happened to me. I got placed in Milan, which was amazing and like a dream come true. So in my 4th year I did my in-country study in 2019, studied at Università Cattolica, and I was taking classes there sort of in media and communications. And I think because I had studied communications, it was very much like essays and research and sort of practical. We had to do this podcast once, we had to do a news day, I dabbled in journalism as well, PR. So it was very much sort of essays and reports and things like that. So I'd never really used Excel. I'd never really dabbled so much in that, like PowerPoint presentations. I mean, sort of, but not to the extent that I would later need to use in my work. So, you know, did my in-country study. I had found an Italian boyfriend also at the time during that year, and I had to move back to Australia because my visa was running out. I'd finished my year of study abroad in Milan and had to go back to Australia. I also had a year left of university, so I had to be in presence in Sydney. So this was like right at the beginning of 2020, and if you guys remember, at the very beginning of 2020 was when COVID hit. So I remember flying back in January of 2020. About a month later, they started having all of these, like, you know, warnings about this pandemic and these threats that were going on in China. And then they were also starting to come to Italy. And my ex-boyfriend, my boyfriend at the time, he went to do like an exchange in Greece, and he had to actually come back to Italy because of the pandemic, and everything was getting locked down, flights were being cancelled. I was in this long distance relationship with this Italian, and my plans to come back to Milan were, it felt like it was all shattered and everything was coming down, and you know, there were no flights in sight. And I remember that year was probably one of the hardest years of my life, and the hardest years of a lot of people's life, I would imagine. It was something, you know, we've never experienced before in our lifetime, which really shook things up and sort of made me question a lot of things. And I knew in my heart that all I wanted to do was just be back in Milan and try and find a job. And I knew I was in a bit of a weird position as well, because I didn't obviously have a work visa. I didn't have any job prospects. It was the middle of COVID. I couldn't even get a flight to go back. So I was just feeling a bit helpless and a bit hopeless and not really knowing what my next step was going to be. And then they opened up like the government applications for exemptions for travel. And since I had my long distance boyfriend at the time, I remember submitting one of those massive PDF things to the Australian government to get this exemption to travel, which it took a couple of months to go through, but I remember it being accepted. I booked my flight the same day back to Italy and flew over to Italy. No job. I was so lucky. I mean, I'd been working throughout that whole year, so I had a little bit of savings. I didn't have a job though. I was on the working holiday visa, so I went back on the working holiday visa. And my goal was to get an internship. And when I got back to Milan, I didn't have anything, but my boyfriend at the time, his cousin was working for this kind of publication, this fashion publication, and it was kind of a digital edition. So they would have, you know, freelance writers, and they would write about different brands and sort of scout different brands for this online publication. And so I started writing for them for a couple of months just to have a bit of money coming in, and it was about 400 euros a month I remember getting from these articles that I was writing. I was writing about 6 a month, and 6 to 10 a month. And then after a while I was like, you know, it's time to sort of get an internship. I remember applying here, there and everywhere, and everything that I found on LinkedIn, and no hope. I was not hearing anything back for months, and I was getting so disheartened. And I remember at the time there, I was living, when I first moved back to Milan, I was living with one of my German friends who I'd met during my exchange year the year prior, and she was going to university with this girl, and she was interning in Versace. And I was like, oh, I didn't have that brand even on my radar, but obviously it's like one of the biggest brands in Italy. It's one of the Italian brands that have the most history. Obviously it's really well known globally, and that just became, I don't know, on my radar for some reason. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try and get an internship there and just start writing to people. I knew I had to change up my strategy because everything that I was applying for I wasn't hearing back from. And I sort of thought to myself, you know, there has to be things out there that are not being published, that are not being posted. I really need to sort of pitch myself in a way to these people, to anyone that I can, anyone who will listen, pretty much. Pitch myself to these people and just see what I get back. I knew that, you know, I was kind of throwing caution to the wind a little bit and, you know, potentially setting myself up for embarrassment, but you really can't think of it like that. When you really want something and you're really hungry for something to work out in your favor, you can't give up. You need to exhaust all avenues, and that is what I told myself, and that is exactly what I did. So I started drafting these little messages that I was sending on LinkedIn, and I was just sort of pitching myself, saying that I was a native English speaker from Australia, and I was really interested in getting into the fashion industry and in a sort of internship position, sort of level, entry level. And I was looking for an internship in e-commerce because I'd previously had this internship in Sydney, and I was doing it part-time while I was studying, and it was a small business. So it really opened my eyes to the world of fashion and how a small business is run, and the different, I think working in a small business, starting in a small business opens your eyes a lot to an industry, because you're seeing all different kinds of parts. You're seeing operations, you're seeing, you know, picking and packing, publishing product, merchandising product, writing product copy, you know, QC, so like quality control of the product. You're kind of seeing everything of that business, which I found really, really interesting. And I was also dabbling in the editorial part as well, which, you know, helped me then to get my first writing job in Milan. But anyway, so that was sort of where I was at. And I remember this one girl from the e-commerce team in Versace had replied to me saying, absolutely, forward me your CV. You know, we're actually sort of looking for one at the moment, but we haven't actually published anything online. So you did really well to reach out to us and told me to send my CV. And I didn't hear back anything for about 3 weeks. And I'd sort of lost hope at that point. She said, I'd forward your CV to HR and fingers crossed. And I was sort of like, okay, I'll just wait and see. And then I was waiting a few weeks, still didn't hear anything back. And then I received this call one morning. I was in my pajamas, disheveled, and I'd sort of woken up and received this call, and she goes, hi, I'm just gonna say Francesca. I am Francesca from the HR team in Versace. And so I remember jumping off this interview and kind of not really thinking anything of it. I remember the questions being a little bit strange and me being so nervous because I felt like I had nothing to really speak off the back of. Like, I didn't really have that much relevant experience, and I knew that going into it. So I suppose I had really high hopes but quite low expectations. And I remember that time vividly because I was going through a little bit of a hard time mentally, just dealing with the stress of not being able to find a job and, you know, having committed to moving my life here, and feeling the pressure to, I guess, make it work, because at that point I still hadn't got the internship yet, and it was kind of like the waiting period. And I remember there were a bunch of forms that I needed to do. I needed to open a SPID because the internships in Italy are government funded, so you have to fill out these different online government forms, and I couldn't get a SPID because I didn't have like an identity card, an Italian identity card, or Italian passport, so I had to find another solution. I ended up finding a way to get a SPID as a non-Italian citizen and without an identity card. So if you're also looking to do that, let me know. I can definitely give you more tips on that. But anyway, so I was going through that, and I remember that week was kind of very stressful for me. I didn't really know what to do with myself. I was sort of, yeah, just like in the feels. I was overthinking everything, and I remember I went to the park to sit with my friend, and we just got a coffee together, and we were just talking about everything and kind of like reevaluating the situation. And I was asking her what she thinks I should do, and she's like, just wait and see. And it was so funny because we were sitting at the park, literally outside the Versace offices, and I get the call from the HR, and she says, you can start your internship next week. And I was so happy. I went home just so excited, and so I started the following week. And at this internship, it was an e-commerce internship, so I was doing a little bit of everything, like picking up, helping a bunch of different teams. They were going through a site redesign at the time, so there were a lot of sort of UAT testing, there was a lot of product copy, and just formatting Excel files and everything. And that's definitely a tip. If you want to work in the fashion industry, you really need to know how to use Excel, and it doesn't matter, I guess, sort of what department you work in. I mean, maybe if you're in a more creative section of the business, you wouldn't need it as much. But for example, anything in e-commerce, business, marketing, even PR, anything in the kind of digital part and digital side of things, and even retail for analysis and things like that, you need to be able to use Excel. And that was something, as I touched on before, that in my degree I hadn't had any experience with. But in all honesty, I really didn't enjoy that internship. It was, I definitely learned a lot, and I learned a lot about what I didn't want to do more than anything. And that sort of, yeah, led me to my next job, which is now, and I will be in that job for another 2 months. So these, as I announced in my last video, I'll be leaving Milan very, very soon in March. So I have very little time left here, which is a little bit sad and bittersweet. But I'm in the digital merchandising field at the moment, so I'm in charge of all the product selections for the newsletter's homepage for Zegna.com, and also for third-party websites. So websites like Farfetch, Harrods, Una, Satire, and kind of the marketplaces that we push through our direct channel. So I've really loved that job while I've been there, and it was really difficult to leave. But I am going to be moving back to Sydney, and I will still be working in the same industry, which is really exciting. And I think as well, it came down to connections that especially I've met since I've been working in this job, and people who I've talked to, and opportunities that have sort of come up. So yeah, a really exciting opportunity has come up for me in Sydney, and so that's obviously part of the reason why I'm moving back. I obviously have my long distance boyfriend, if you haven't caught on already, and he is in Australia obviously. So there's a bunch of reasons why I'm sort of planning to move back, but I'm going to be sort of redirecting this channel, I suppose, in a way where I still have such a connection to Milan, and I really want to maintain that in my videos going forward. But I will be sort of transitioning a little bit, still want to do a lot of fashion content, still want to do a lot of, I guess, my journey and my thoughts as I share a lot on here, and just bringing you a lot of fun content, more videos about my job, more videos about career, and more videos about chasing change, and just, I guess, going through all of these moments in life. I really want to do more style videos. I really want to do like, Sydney recommendations, because I guess that's also a city that's going to be new to me. So, and Australia, I know, is very far away for Europeans. So I really want to show you what life is like there and the things I get up to and how my life differs and what I think of it after 5 years of being away living in Italy. And I suppose, yeah, that's kind of the direction of this channel. And as I said in my last video, I really hope you guys will stick around to follow the journey, because yeah, my interests have stayed the same, but I'm just growing, and I hope you will stay around to grow with me, I guess. So I really want to make this, I guess, a kind of like series on my channel. I will have videos coming up after this where I want to, I guess, delve a little bit more into my experiences in the different jobs. But yeah, I feel like that's gonna wrap up today's video. I hope you found it insightful and it helped you in some way. And I really hope you will join me for this journey, this ending to my Milan era. But I'm still gonna be here posting videos, and I hope different types of videos as well. So get excited for that. And yeah, thank you again for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I know I have a lot of viewers that are not necessarily subscribed, so definitely go hit that subscribe button as well, and give this video a like if you enjoyed, and I will see you very soon in my next one.